Watch me paint an acrylic jellyfish using a monochromatic color scheme and ramble for an hour straight with very minimal editing. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button. I've been wanting to make a video like this for a long time where I take my raw footage and I don't break it down into bite-sized pieces. I don't edit it to death so it's super short for the attention span of my students or the internet, but where I just kind of talk about my process and kind of ramble, and I do it in real time. Sadly, this photograph of a jellyfish is not my personal photograph, but I got it from the website unsplash.com. That is such a great copyright-free, royalty-free website because it's all accumulated from actual photographers. So all of the subject matter is free to use for the classroom, for educational purposes, and it's all high quality images. So I like my students to use that website when we do our pet portrait unit. If they're doing something that is not their actual pet, like for example, this jellyfish, I could go to like the zoo and photograph it, but instead I got a really good photograph from a professional photographer, and I'll link that photographer and shout them out and give them some credit in my description box. I'm freehanding this. I'm just trying to get as much information as I can from the photograph. And I've done this before in the classroom where students trace an image with the parameters that it has to be royalty free for educational purposes, or it's their own photograph of a pet. And so since I don't have a pet jellyfish, I'm just going to try and capture most of the detail. It doesn't have to look exactly like the photograph. I can just capture the nuance of it, and it can be slightly different. You can also tell that I'm focusing on value here. So I'm doing something called value mapping, where I'm outlining the shape of the values. It's hard to see in this photograph, but the background is actually darker at the top, and then it fades slightly down at the bottom. I might play with that and fake it a little bit. Now at this point, I'm going to mix a monochromatic color scheme, and I'm going to call this a painter's black. My students freak out when I hide all the black paint for this unit, but I like for them to make a really dark neutral, and I call it a painter's black. And you're going to use lots of blue, red, and a very small amount of yellow. So basically you're browning out a blue violet. If it looks too brown, add more blue. And that's basically the advice I give is add more blue. And so my students always freak out. They want me to use the container of black paint. They don't want to make it themselves. And then you always have the argument on the internet of, oh, the CMYK is the primary color scheme. I was always taught red, yellow, blue, nothing against CMYK, but that's a great black for printing. And if you have magenta in your set of colors, by all means use it, but I keep things simple with just the red, yellow, blue. And I am using Blickyrlics. That is from the brand Blick Art Materials, and a lot of art teachers use it. It's something that is affordable for the classroom, but if you're doing a painting at home, you might want to do more of a heavy body acrylic. It is very watery. It's a little thin. My students like it. I mean, it gets good results. It's certainly better than some of the cheaper value paints that you might buy at Walmart. But I wouldn't say it's like a 5-star paint, but that's okay. I like to use materials that are very approachable on this channel because most of my subscribers are art teachers, art students, and I think you can make beautiful art with inexpensive materials, but you can make beautiful art with expensive materials too. You just have to pick what you want to spend your money on. And you can see I'm doing my painter's black, or if black is if that's triggering because it's not like a Mars black or like an ivory black, we can call it a dark neutral if that makes your brain feel better. And now that I have the darkest shade of my painting, my neutral black, I'm going to take my base color. And so this will be shades and tints of ultramarine blue. I'm going to add that black, that neutral dark to my blue so that it is still really dark, but it is more of a blue and not quote unquote black. So with my students, when I teach this, and even with myself, I do like to start with my darkest values. There's something really satisfying about getting that on the canvas. You could definitely start with midtones, your base color. You could start with your tints or your light colors, but I've been in the habit of teaching it this way, so this is kind of the way I'm creating it. And you can see I'm moving pretty slow. I'm using very cheap brushes. These came in packs of like 10. I believe my department director got these on Amazon. I do like a Royal Langnickel brush, and I am a fan of a round brush. I love a brush with a point, but a square brush works really well for these large background areas. These brushes lasted a while, and because they were so inexpensive, I've had them for, I think, 3 school years, and I still have packs of them. So I'm usually a brush snob, but if it's, given to me for my classroom. I'm going to use it. And so I'm mixing on a plastic palette. These are great, but the lids aren't the best. So you have to replace the lids a little bit quicker than you have to replace the palette itself. And what I'm going to do now is a value scale. And so since I mixed that second darkest shade, we're going to call black, quote unquote, my dark neutral. We're going to call that the darkest or black. And so what I have my students do before we start is I print out a ton of these, and they practice different colors, and they do a progression of shades and tints. We definitely practice it together with a set of basic colors, and then they can mix whatever base color they would like. A lot of them choose to do gray because it's just simple if they've never done a painting like this before. Color is always more complicated than value. So although it seems like this is a painting about color, it's about value, the lightness and darkness of a color, and it's about contrast. So honestly, I think gray is a very good place to start because of that. You can really focus on those lights and darks and not get distracted by the base color. So I'm just going in, painting around my tentacles. And the thing with acrylic paint that I love is you can just paint layer after layer. You do one thing, you don't like it, you can paint over it. You can make it darker, you can make it lighter. And a good variety sizes of brushes is a good thing to do. I'm always guilty of just using the same brush, but smaller brushes for smaller areas, larger brushes for larger. And I'm also guilty of just kind of sticking to the round brush and not using the different shapes. So I'm just kind of going through and very slowly filling in the gaps. I like to do my dark background first, and then I'm going to cut in between the tentacles. And then that way you just have a really good, idea of the shape of your subject matter. And I'm going to carefully kind of go through some of these areas. Again, might be darker or lighter, but I can do like a base layer and then manipulate the value as I go. Definitely something that I wouldn't paint in one day. Always like to let things dry. I love mixing wet on wet, so mixing directly on the canvas itself, but I do like to then let it dry and then have a little bit more control. And that's a great way to get lighter highlights and darker values, is to let it dry and then do a second or third coat so there's no mixing directly on the canvas. So I'm doing this in my classroom. So I am a high school teacher, teach in the public school system. And if it's an educational resource, something I would use in the classroom, this is my job. This is something I show my students. So this is something I do on company time. And so this video is something I would film during my planning period. It would be something that I would film maybe on a teacher work day, not when I'm actively teaching, of course, because when you have 30 high school students in your classroom, it's not like you can sit down and paint, which sometimes I can, which is great. But if it's something I'm using as an educational resource in my classroom, obviously I should get paid to do that because it's part of my job. A lot of my videos I do at home. So I have been playing around with affiliate marketing. So if I'm filming a video about a product, obviously that's a conflict of my job as a public school teacher. So I might mention it, talk about my students, but it's not something I would film at work. I would do that all outside of company time or at my house. A lot of my voiceovers I do at home, although I do like to do my voiceovers at work if it's a long tutorial like this. I have several monochromatic painting tutorials that I've made that I play for my students or I put in Google Classroom so if they're absent or I need a review. So again, if it's something I'm doing for my job, for my students, then I will by all means use my instructional or my plan time for that. And then if it's something for my channel that's not quite related to something I would actually teach, like my DIY videos, or my personal art making practice. Those are things I would do in my home studio. So I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow here to make more of that quote unquote black and doing another layer. It definitely has more of a brown to it. If that happens to your neutral, you can add more blue as you see me doing here. You could definitely buy black right out of the tube. I guess I haven't talked about why I'm making my students mix their own black. But a lot of times it's such a dominant pigment, you lose nuance and control of your other colors. So if you're using a dark neutral that's made up of the colors that you're using in your painting, everything is more harmonious and it's less muddy and you have less of a likelihood of that color black just dominating. So a lot of painters you'll see don't use black at all, or they make their own neutral. My favorite neutral when I'm doing oil painting is phthalo blue. No. Prussian blue because it's so dark. And then I use burnt umber, and that combination, it's a warm and a cool. They neutralize beautiful. And that's the dark that I use when I'm doing watercolor and oil paint at home. Here in the classroom, though, we're sticking to the Roy G. Biv red, yellow, blue primary color scheme. And down at the bottom here, I'm trying to make a nice value scale where I'm going from that neutral dark all the way to my base color of ultramarine blue. And this is it's harder with these colors to get a full range of shades. It's much easier to get tints because the titanium white that I use, or actually I think I use blockout white. The blockout white is exceptional. It makes all your colors opaque. If you have a color that's kind of stringy and see-through, I would highly advise to add a little titanium white to it. Although you are going to lighten your colors, so kind of keep that in mind. And if you're using a different set of colors at home, every color, every pigment, every brand is going to react differently. So keep that in mind when you buy different brands of paint. Everyone's going to react differently, and even different blues are going to mix differently with different reds. So experiment, do color swatches. That's part of being an artist, is finding your color palette and finding your voice. So I'm going in now with my small round brush, and I'm going to find those shades within the jellyfish. I did want to develop the background first. One of the things I see students do is they work so much on the subject, and then all of a sudden the background's like an afterthought, or it becomes just like one solid color. I know that seems very hypocritical because it pretty much looks like one solid color back here with my jellyfish, but I did try to create a little bit of nuance, and I am going to add some bubbles at the end. But jellyfish are pretty flat. If you've ever gone to a museum, or not a museum, if you've ever gone to a zoo and looked at the jellyfish, you would think that there's all this nuance of light, but it's pretty flat, the background and the jellyfish themselves. I was actually at the Oklahoma Zoo yesterday, and now I'm regretting that I didn't go into, do they have an aquarium area? I know at the Columbia Museum, or I keep saying museum, at the Columbia Zoo in South Carolina, I would go in college and I would just draw, paint jellyfish constantly because I lived right by the zoo, and I was in a painting class, and so it was a subject that I really liked. I don't know if we have jellyfish at the Oklahoma City Zoo. I don't know. I was there yesterday and didn't even think to look, but I do love to go to the zoo to draw. The flamingos are really fun. The giraffe makes a great subject matter. So if you've never gone to the zoo with a sketchbook, I highly recommend it. Maybe not in June or July. The summer's a hot time for it. So back to the painting, I told you I'd be rambling. I'm adding some more shades, but the goal here is to get to the base color. One thing my students struggle with, I have white on my palette, but one thing I avoid with my students is putting white on the palette too soon, because when you mix black and white, it makes gray, which is a beautiful color, but those are called tones, and that will make your painting very grayed out. And so you want to, or I want my students, when they're first learning how to paint shades and tints, to do pure shades, base color and black, and have control over their palette, and then pure tints, base color and white, so you don't get those grayed out colors. Now, if you're doing a gray painting, obviously you're only using black and white, but if you're doing any other base color, and I'll put some student examples at the end of this video. I also have a full website with this lesson. My Instagram has tons and tons of student examples throughout the years. And if you're looking for short form content, this is definitely a long rambling video, maybe perfect to put with the sound off in a classroom while students are painting. It'd be even great to fall asleep to because, it's an hour long. But I like to have my students have control. So I will actually hide the white paint until they're ready for their tints, which drives them crazy, but that's okay. As their teacher, it's my job to drive them a little bit crazy. And at this point, I think I'm getting close to just pure blue. It does have a little tiny bit of my quote unquote black, my neutral dark, to make it a shade of blue that's very close. And then I'm picking out the parts that I'm going to call the midpoint. And the midpoint of the monochromatic painting would be your base color, so my ultramarine blue. So I'm painting that here. The top section is going to be my tints. And I'm going to have a full range of them in my jellyfish. I might even lie a little bit and add more tints that are actually there. Because believe it or not, a jellyfish really is more flat than you would think. I know I've said that before. But as the painter, as the artist, it's totally up to me if I want to create more nuance, more detail, artistic license, right? I can make it whatever I would like because my goal is not to resemble this photograph exactly. Now, if that is your goal, you're going to want to be very particular about your details, and you could trace it. And I do know some people have issues tracing, but I remember in college, my painting professor, we were learning egg tempera. And he had a very specific technique he wanted us to use. And so we brought in a photograph to use and we traced it. And that really blew my mind because I always thought as a young art student that tracing was bad and that's cheating and you should have to be able to draw everything. And I think in some ways that's true. But in an educational setting, in a painting class, if you're doing a technique like egg tempera and that's the focus, that's the outcome, is having control of that material. And you're setting up a roadblock if you're focusing on the drawing and you're limiting your painting by your ability to draw. And if you take that barrier away in an educational environment, and then you can really focus on the technique, you can focus on a new material. And that just completely blew my thought process wide open. Why not allow a student to trace something, especially if it's their own image or it's copyright free? I'm not making money with this painting. I'm not going to sell it. It's going to slowly die in my classroom, in my demo drawer. So why not remove that barrier so that students can experience success with a particular technique? And maybe they're really good at color and value in painting, and then the drawing part can come later. So I thought that was a really great philosophy, and that's something that I have incorporated in my teaching. I do feel weird sometimes posting that on the internet because the internet is just everyone has an opinion, and sometimes people just come at you that allowing students to trace is cheating, just mindsets with that. But you know what? My classroom, my rules, and I've seen just great results. And students have just really flourished with their painting skills and learned a lot with that taken out. Now, I do have students that won't trace it. They want to draw their own image, and I support that completely. Some students love the grid drawing method in Art 1. They did a grid drawing, and so some of them just love that. And I will say I do love grid drawing too. I've done that as a young student, and I do remember that really helped me learn how to draw because I could see each shape and I could see the relationship of the line. And so that is a great strategy. I think if you've never done a grid drawing before and you feel like drawing is really difficult, that is a great way to learn how to see. And contour drawing, especially blind contour drawing, is another method to really loosen up and practice that high hand-eye coordination. I could go on and on about contour drawing. I have so many videos about that on my channel. It's my favorite way to draw. It's my favorite way to teach drawing. It's one of those foundational skills. I mean, I just love it. My sketchbook is filled with them, and I have my students do it, whether they're in Art 2, AP Art. I even had 5th grade students contour draw. Man, I just love it. So you can see what I'm doing now. My value scale, I'm still pretty, I don't want to say dark because it's a tint, but I'm still very close to that basic titanium white, not titanium white, that basic base color of ultramarine blue. And so I'm trying to just map out any area that is base blue or pretty darn close to it. I'm not doing my lightest lights yet. And hopefully you can see why I like to start with my students with the shades, because right now it's already kind of looking like not a fully developed painting, but you can squint at it and see where it's heading. And I think sometimes when you start with a tint, it's hard to see that because the contrast isn't there. So it doesn't matter if you start in the middle of the value scale, if you start at the end, but I think sometimes starting with the shades is just a really great way to see that. And I should say, I'm doing my value scale in real time. So as I mix the color, as I mix the value, I'm mapping it out just as a sense of organization, which, to be perfectly honest, is definitely not something I would do at my home studio with my oil paint. I just jump right in and hope for the best, which isn't good. That's just me. I'm a little impulsive when it comes to painting. I like to get a bunch of paint on paper and then try and fix whatever mistakes I made. So this is definitely a better way to do it as far as a disciplined way to paint. And if you are new to painting, absolutely. And I should say my students have made several of these value scales already, and then their formative assessment, so their check that they check for understanding, if you're a public school teacher, would be the value scale, and they would need to successfully complete, give them a number, a 7-step, a 10-step value scale in the color scheme of their choice. And so that would be their ticket to starting their final painting. I'm painting really small. I don't even remember the size of this, but it's like a tiny little canvas because these paintings do take forever. And so I'm using this as an instructional tool. And so I didn't want to be painting on this for the rest of my life. I have other things I teach. I have other things I need to do in my planning period. And so I do work a little bit smaller when I do these demo pieces. My students, I print out their photograph for them. They have the cutest pets. And I just love this project because they get to choose photographs of beloved pets that they currently have, pets from the past. And some of them choose to do what I'm doing and just pick like a generic like lion face or a generic snake or a red panda, like something that they don't have access to. And that's fine too, because although I always love a personal connection in art, sometimes if you're focusing on a particular technique, it's okay to like cut out that and just focus on the how-to of it all. What the heck was I talking about? Oh, yes. So I take their photographs and they put them in a Google Doc, and then I have them edit them for me because I have, 4 sections of 30 students. So we're talking a lot here that I'm printing for them. And so I have them edit it in their Google Doc. So you just go and change it to black and white, and you can play with the contrast. And some students have a great eye for value right off the jump. And then some students pick a photo that's really like doesn't have a lot of contrast, or maybe their granddad took it on their Android and it doesn't have a great camera. So I will edit a little bit if I feel like, okay, this photograph is going to be difficult for them to meet the challenge of finding as many shades and tints as they're going to be graded for. And so then I print them directly from the Google Doc that they share with me. And it does take a while, but that is something I do in class because, again, why am I going to stay late after school? They're in the middle of mixing. Once I've taught them how to do their shades and tints, then they spend a day in class like getting their doc ready. And in Oklahoma, schools or phones are illegal, which is another interesting topic. No phones are allowed during school hours, from bell to bell. And so they have to do, if it's a personal photograph this year, they had to do it for homework, which is interesting. But, this is a project that has personal meaning. So I didn't have an issue with that. Students put a photograph in the doc. And then those who didn't, that's why we have that website I talked about. I keep wanting to say setpose.com. That's the figure drawing one, unsplash.com. And so if they want, they can just pick, a really high quality photograph of any animal. There's so many options on there. Oh, I love that edge that I just did. Edges are important in a painting. Once you map out all the value and it's really smushy, then I go back in like a sculptor and I like carve away and whittle away those edges. Okay, back to the photograph. So when I print them, I got smart, and the canvases are 8.5 by 11, which is the exact size of the piece of paper. So it makes transferring their image and pencil to their canvas much easier. So let's mix a little bit more white here. I just love mixing tints. It's so satisfying. This blue especially, you can see, right? Like this Blickyrlic paint that doesn't always get the best reviews. If you add white to it, you get some really lovely colors. And I'm a Blick diehard. That's the website I've been using all 17 years of teaching. I buy my own art supplies from that website. I really like their name brand stuff, the Blick art materials. I'm not sponsored by them. I should be. But I just really love that brand. So I'm going to go in and kind of tap and find that like blend of that one tint to the next. And that's the fun part of painting. That's why I like to paint wet on wet, so you can take one value and kind of like smush or pull it into the next. I just love painting so much, and I'm just a color nerd. I just love the nuance of color. I love the nuance of blending color together. Look at that, just that nuance of a little bit lighter value right on top, finding that texture. I could do this all day long, which is probably good since I became an art teacher. So if you're still listening at this mark, drop a comment and let me know what you think, because I am fully prepared for this video to not do well. I'm definitely a channel that is not like, I'm not a gossip channel. I'm not a trending topics channel. I'm more of a like searchable channel. So you might search like how to do this, how to do that. So some of my videos do really well and get a lot of views. And then some of them might sit at like 200 views for years. But I make them just the same. If it's something I'm teaching, would teach, could teach, interested in teaching, I'll make a video, put it on the internet and see what happens. And so these long videos, I used to make them. That was all I did. And then TikTok and YouTube Shorts came along, and I feel like everyone's attention spans just have become tiny, including me. If a video is longer than 30 seconds, I feel like people just won't watch it. And I'm taking these long videos. This was 82 minutes of footage. So it took me 82 minutes of footage to finish this jellyfish painting. And back in the day, I would edit this down to probably like a 10, 15-minute video. I try for most of my videos to be over 8 minutes, because if you have an 8-minute video on YouTube, at the 8-minute mark, that's when you can do a mid-roll ad. So you can put an ad in the middle of your video. And sometimes people get annoyed that there's ads, but I mean, I'm not getting paid for this. This is completely, yes, I'm doing this for my students, but any of my videos that I post for the world to use, I have teachers using my videos, I have students using it at home, people that homeschool their kids, and you don't pay anything. It's just here on the internet for you. So, like, it's like shopping local, like watch the ad, right? Also, what I do is because I fall asleep to YouTube videos, I just pay for YouTube Premium. Yes, I know it's another subscription service, but I don't want ads as I'm sleeping. And so I just pay a little bit for that. The creator still gets money. And then you can have an ad-free experience. But I really think short form content is great. But I think the rapid fire scrolling and these short little videos, it's ruining our brains. It's ruining our attention spans. I mean, if I could have my students sit and watch a 5-minute video, I would be amazed. Everything has to be just quick, just instant gratification. And I'm guilty of that too. I will lay there and scroll as I fall asleep on TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram. And I just think, I don't know, I'm ready to kind of slow things down a little bit, to not be in a hurry, to see things without the editing. So this video is going to end up being like 62, 63 minutes. It depends on any pauses I forgot to edit out at this point. So over an hour of footage. I already edited it down for 82. And then you will see this footage again. I will make a shorter video. You'll see like a 8-minute video on how to paint a jellyfish monochromatic, and you will for sure see a like 1-minute video of a YouTube Shorts version, and then I'll probably even edit it down even shorter to like a 30-second like time-lapse video of the painting. So it's just crazy. I mean, it's very satisfying to see something in short bursts, but just the attention span and just the idea that we can't focus on something for longer than 30 seconds, 10 seconds. I don't know. I've seen a big difference in my own brain chemistry and for sure in my students as well. Well, while I've been rambling about that, look at these beautiful tints I've created. Like I said, you can have more success with tints with this block out white. Titanium white is another great option. And it just creates this beautiful range. And I'm trying to be very picky about where the highlights are and just layering. Again, this is wet on wet. So it's nice because the colors kind of blend to each other because they haven't dried yet. And then you're going to see me let this dry, and then I'll go back in to create a little bit of contrast with the second layer. Another good thing about acrylic paint is it dries so quickly, which can be annoying if you're used to oil paint. But this paint is so thin. I mean, it dries just like that. Like you can have a section dry in 10 minutes depending on how thick of paint you've used. And so that's a really fun thing with acrylic. My painting style, as I mentioned, you can see that everything's a little bit thicker and bigger than it needs to be. And then I'm going to go back in and like whittle down the areas, go back in with that dark and like cut in. And that's another reason I like to do my background. If not first, definitely don't fully develop your subject. That is such, an amateur move. Don't fully develop your subject and then forget about the background. Your subject cannot exist outside the space that it's in. So even if it's not a realistic painting of like a jellyfish in the water, whatever subject you're creating and whatever environment they're in, there would be reflected light. There's an interaction between the subject, the figure-ground relationship that shouldn't be missed. And a really great way to do that is to make sure that you are putting paint on all surfaces of your canvas at the same time. So don't just focus on one area, but make sure that you're adding paint consistently in all areas. Now, there will be a time where you focus in on the detail. Ooh, look at that little highlight I'm creating. I just love these light tints. They're just so beautiful. And don't just jump right into white. Let those like really light tints happen. What the heck was I talking about? Oh, yes. And then the color too. Make sure you dab your brush, whatever your background is. If it's not monochromatic, let's say the background's red. If the jellyfish is swimming in a red background, there's going to be red on the jellyfish itself because, again, the background is never isolated from the subject. They always have an interaction, whether it's reflected light, There's always an interaction, color, texture. And so that's just some advice that I give my students often is don't save the background for last. From the camera angle here, it looks like I just painted it one solid color, but you saw that I did pay attention to my shades, and I'm going to play with that when it's dry. And I'm going to darken even more that top edge, and then I'm going to put blue at the bottom as well. And so you can see with this lightest tint, I'm just going in and finding those lightest areas, not doing pure white yet. I'm going to do that, save that for last. And then the purest white areas, I'm going to go in and then layer once it's dry. One strategy for value, if let's say you're doing a still life and you have lots of different colors to look at and it's confusing because really you can't have a successful color without understanding value in the lightness and darkness of those colors. But a trick is, let's say you're drawing from life and you're painting something with lots of different colors, take a picture of it and then put it in black and white. And then that'll show you where are the lightest and darkest areas of the artwork without regards to color. Because you might be so distracted by the yellow that you don't realize that it's actually much darker than like the light blue that it's next to. So that's a good trick. And I'll do that with my painting too, like take a picture of it, put it in black and white and see, okay, do my colors, do my values correspond to the actual values that I'm looking at? And all of that is just a fun puzzle to work out. Art is giving yourself a puzzle. It's exploring your own brain, your own ideas. And although realism is somewhat boring and not always the expectation, I do want my paintings to look like I know what the heck I'm doing. And there is something about realism that I'm always achieving. I want it to look right, not necessarily correct as far as like photorealism. So at this point of the process, I edited out the transition, but I have let it dry. And now I am with my smallest round brush going in with straight block out white. So I am finding those lightest lights. And the devil's in the detail here is differentiating between what's actually white and what's the lightest blue, the second lightest blue, the third lightest blue. If you can have 3 to 5 values of your shades and your tints, you will have a much more developed, much more 3D, much more nuanced painting. And sometimes I lie a little bit, like I want maybe more white in a section, or maybe I want my highlights to be more dramatic, but paying attention. And again, if you're focusing not on realism necessarily, but like an accuracy, studying objects and how they reflect light and how they interact with light in a setting, changing the light. Is it outdoor lighting? Is it studio lighting? All of that will play a part in how a painting looks. And I am a contrast person. I love lights and darks. I love contrast. So I always feel like I maybe push it too far. I always feel like I could be a little bit more subtle, a little bit more nuanced, but I'm 40 years old and still doing it. So I think at this point, it's just who I am. I do think this is, for me personally, the most satisfying part of a painting when you know, like, okay, it looks the way I want it to look. It's not completely done, but like I've done the hard part of like capturing the subject to where any person looking at this is like, oh, a jellyfish. And so in that way, it's successful. And then just finding those moments, finding the small little details, going in with the value, playing around and mixing little values that interact right next to each other. To me, that's the most fun part of a painting, is that stage when you're like, okay, I do know what I'm doing. Because every time I start a painting, especially an oil painting, in the classroom, a painting like this, I feel very confident with. Not to brag, I've been doing this a long time, and this isn't, it's a more simplified painting. But a lot of times if I'm starting something like a plein air oil, or if I haven't painted in oil in a while, I'll like completely forget how to do it. I'll have negative self-talk where I'm like, you don't even know how to paint. And so it's nice to get to the point where you're like, I know what I'm doing. I should get paid for this. And so I'm going back in and finding those moments. I'm also getting really hungry. It's almost 1:00. It's summer break for me. And so that is past my lunchtime, but I'm just rambling and I kind of want to get this video finished so I can move on. I have 82 minutes of footage on my phone. I feel like my phone's going to explode if I don't delete that and clear up some storage space. Probably won't even be able to download this to my phone and upload it to YouTube. So we'll see if that happens. But I'm getting hungry. At school last year, my lunchtime was at 10:30. 10:30. By 11:05, I had students back in my classroom for my next class. I mean, that's just a crazy time to eat lunch. I love being a teacher, but that's wild. I mean, how am I supposed to have dinner at a regular time if I'm eating at 10:30? And I'm not one of those people who can skip breakfast. My coworker had the same lunch as me. she would just skip breakfast and then like have a big breakfast slash lunch, I guess brunch at 10:30. I can't do that. I have to eat or I'm super cranky, super tired, get dizzy. I have to eat frequently. I have a big appetite. So I don't know what's for lunch today. Hopefully something delicious. That's the beauty also of summer break is I have this intense schedule during the school year. And then in the summer, I get to just pull back and have a slower lifestyle and just focus on myself and focus on things I want to do. And sometimes I do get bored, but most of the time it's just a wonderful change of pace. I do have some exciting personal news for this summer. I'm doing an art residency outside of Boston in Beverly, Massachusetts. That is such a hard state to say. And it's going to be a whole week of just focusing on painting. And my dad's side of the family is from Boston. So it's right in that area. And so they came over from Portugal and they settled in East Boston, and that's where my granddad grew up. And so I've been there a couple times as a kid, but I haven't been to Boston since I was like 10 or 12 years old. And so I'm really excited to kind of do like a little back to my roots type thing, explore the city as an adult, do some painting field trips on the coast. It's near Salem, so I plan on doing all that. And so I've been really practicing drawing and painting every day to kind of prepare myself for that. I also love it because it's an art educator's residency, but the focus is on your personal art. And not that I can't learn anymore about the science of teaching art. I think being an art teacher is not something that should be accidental. There's a lot of skills. There's a lot of thought process behind the actual educational component. But as far as my own personal practice, I feel like that's something that I'm really itching to focus on more. I feel like as a teacher, I give everything away. Even my degree is art education, so everything's focused on not how can I be the best painter, but how can I learn how to teach someone else to be the best painter. And so this is a phase of life where I'm just really ready to focus on myself and really ready to focus on my own art making practice, which I believe will make me a better educator. Those who are passionate about what they teach and who are able to, you know, to push themselves to be better, I think are, you know, I hope a better inspiration. I know for me, all my favorite teachers were people who actually did the thing they taught, loved it, were able to approach it with their own personal interest. And so that is something I'm really excited to do. And so I'm sure I'll have lots of videos about that. And I can't wait to see what I'm going to create because I really have no idea what is going to come out of that. Besides eating lots of lobster. I definitely know that is something, here I go back on the food conversation, but definitely something I plan to do as well. At this point, I have to be perfectly honest, I'm just dying to edit this video to be shorter. I'm wanting to speed it up. I'm wanting to cut out all the pauses. And I have already edited it a little bit. I said at the beginning I was going to talk for over an hour, which I will, but I've got it right down almost to like 61 minutes because I just couldn't help myself. And when I make these videos for school, I edit out every moment of pause, any like this moment right here, any moment of non-action, I just remove it. And that's why my videos are pretty fast paced. I think it's nice to see an artist work slow, even though I shaved off 12 minutes already. I think it's good to see if you're really learning how to paint and not like I'm, you know, this is just one way to do things. But I think it's really good to kind of see things in real time. And I'm so used to just pushing things as quickly as possible. What's the most important moments? I have my, you know, students' attention span for this amount of time, the internet, and even less amount of time. What is it? I think if you don't hook a video in the first 3 seconds, there's like this 95% swipe away rate. Isn't that crazy that we're trying to do things to get people's attention in 3 seconds, or it's not worth watching. It's not worth anything if you can't get someone's attention in 3 seconds. And I understand that from like a marketing standpoint, but that's crazy. And I don't know, like, sure, for my own social media channel, I'm going to have to like know that as a metric if I do want to make money. But as far as an educator, I'm not here to tap dance like 3 seconds to get your attention. No way. I just think we have just done our brains a total injustice living our life that way. I think slowing things down, letting things happen naturally. I don't know. I'm just really in a phase of life where I'm craving that. So you can see I'm going back back to the painting, I'm going back and I'm shaving down some of those darker areas. So the tentacles are clearly way too thick, but I wanted to have a little nuance of color and I wanted them to overlap. And by color, I do mean value. And so now I'm kind of, as I talked about, shaving them down. So I always paint like a sculptor where I like whittle things back down to the shape and form that I want them to be. And I'm using the teeniest brush, probably because I am making the teeniest little painting, and finding those edges as well. So not only getting the value in the right place, but what edge. So what value is this next to that? And that's an important thing to really focus on when you're at this stage of a painting. Someone less of a perfectionist could be done. I certainly would have students at this point say that they're finished, they feel done with the painting. But for me, there's nothing like those final, I really could spend hours doing this, moments where you just really analyze interactions, edges, values, and you just spend your time focusing on the nuance. And this is a great subject matter for that. And it's a great material for this because we're limiting our color to just value. And so you can really focus on the simplicity of just looking at the areas of light and dark. As promised, I'm going to get this corner a little bit darker. I know the photograph sitting on camera, you can't see the nuance. So you'll just have to trust me that it is darker in that corner. And even if it wasn't, like as an artist, I want it to be. And you could do a whole thing where maybe the left side of the painting is lighter and it fades over to dark. It just depends on where your light source is. And then I'm going to do, as I was discussing, and shaving out and getting those tentacles a little bit thinner. On a completely unrelated note, I live near Oklahoma City and I teach near Oklahoma City, and I am so bummed out. I'm a transplant to Oklahoma. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, and I don't care about sports. I went to the University of South Carolina, and we were the Gamecocks, and football was a whole big deal. Not to me, I was an art major, but I got really into the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's our NBA team, and I loved him when I first moved here with the whole Russell Westbrook era. But now with this team we have and watching them win the NBA Finals last year, I'm so bummed out that we didn't win. And I don't know why, because I think the Spurs, they're a great team, but I want them to lose so bad. I want the Knicks to just totally destroy them. And it looks like that's kind of where we're headed. There might be a game tonight. So depending on when I post this, that'll kind of determine, you can see like how long it takes to get these videos up and going. I filmed this 2 months ago, easy. I probably filmed this at the end of April. And here I am finally editing it, mostly because of the 82 minutes of footage really has my phone struggling for storage. But I am just a huge Oklahoma City Thunder fan these days, and I'm so sad. I know it doesn't matter. They're NBA players. They get paid $40 million a year, but it would have been really nice to have gone to the finals and won again. I think Oklahoma, it seems like people just think we don't have nice things. It's not a good place to live. And I think the Oklahoma City Thunder is one of the nicest and best things about Oklahoma, and I just really wanted us to win. So that is my completely off-topic rambling subject. And I'm painting here, just being super careful with that like ruffle down the middle. Obviously, it's not a ruffle. It's something else. I don't know what it's called. I'm not a biologist. I don't know all the anatomy of the jellyfish. I'm just looking at shape and form and value. And I'm trying to get it not outliney here. I don't want it to look like there's like a white line that outlines the whole subject matter. Outlining is the death of form in your paintings. If you want something to flatten out, immediately outline it, whether it's with a dark line, a white line, a red line, that's going to completely flatten things out. So I'm always striving to avoid that. There's a time and a place for outlining. I do love a good pen and ink drawing where maybe I paint something and then go in with line work with a micron pen. I do a ton of that in my sketchbook. I've really been doing a lot of that, and it's been really fun. I love to draw my students, and so line is important, don't get me wrong, but with a painting, we're focusing on form. We're wanting to make the illusion that it's three-dimensional, that this jellyfish could swim off the page, and so avoid any outlines. And that's hard because let's say I'm painting my dog and I have my eye, and the dog's eye is very similar in color to its fur. If you outline that sucker with black paint, then, oh, there's the eye. So you like find the eye, but you lose the actual realism and the form of the object. So that's a habit that students have and young artists, and still me. If you want to find a shape, you just do high contrast. So that's something I really try and not do with my work as well. Okay, I took a shower and I'm back to my voiceover because it is confirmed that my husband and I are going to go out to lunch at an Italian restaurant. You know, it's summer when you're eating at a restaurant in the middle of the day. So that is something to look forward to, especially since my stomach is audibly growling. This is also, I think, this long form video, it's interesting to remind myself of my process because I could easily be done. When is a painting done? Absolutely never if I'm the one working on it because there's just always more to see. And so at this point, I bet, again, I did this 2 months ago, but I bet I was completely like ready to be done, like stop painting. And I think that's why time is such a valuable asset as a painter. So what I like to do is like find a stopping point and then put it somewhere in a room where when I walk in, it's the first thing I see. And then I'll have like a gut reaction to it. And it might be, oh yeah, you're finished, or ooh, needs more dark, or oh, your edges are unclear, or the tentacles are too thick, whatever that reaction may be. And so I think having time away from a work of art is great. That's why I don't mind like long breaks or weekends. Like sometimes we'll start an artwork in semester one because I do teach year-long classes. And so we'll start something like at the end of December and then come back to it in January. It doesn't always work out. Sometimes students are just bored to death with that like long amount of time. But I think it's really good to have some space and time away from something. What isn't good is when you have like lots of short little breaks. So I think with this painting in particular, we started it I think like March, like before spring break. Then we had spring break. Then we had like a day off for something, a day off for something else. We gave the ACT at school, so we didn't have like, we had a 4-day week. And so this painting always takes a while, but it took forever this semester just because of the breaks. And so sometimes that can be like, all right, we're just ready to move on in general. But that's nice what I'm doing. I'm really toning down that dark shape and meeting it with a more like medium tint, and that's a really nice shape. And I think I'm trying to bring out the shape of the, what is it called? It's not a dome, a nettle, whatever this part of the jellyfish is, the non-tentacle area, and finding that shape, which isn't an exact replica. It's a little bit flatter. It doesn't have the same dome shape as it does in the photograph, but I'm totally fine with that. It's not like this is someone's jellyfish. Like this is Rover, the pet jellyfish that has to look exactly like Rover, or, you know, the person buying it isn't going to be happy. It's just a value study. It's a practice. It is nice. It does remind me of my days painting jellyfish back in college. And it makes me wish I would have looked for jellyfish at the Oklahoma Zoo to see if that was an option because they are so much fun to draw and paint. And I did have several students choose to paint jellyfish this year, and they did just a beautiful job. They look beautiful in grayscale. I always go for like that blue color because it so resembles how they look in the actual ocean or in the aquarium if that's where you're viewing the jellyfish. I'm so tempted to speed this video up. Everything in my body is telling me like, be done. Go ahead and do like the 2-point speed. Ooh, look at that. I do think that's what this painting is missing. And I will show you, I do some unusual techniques to find it, but those really thin tentacles, that line right there created such nice movement. And because it's thinner than the lines in the middle of the jellyfish, that is really nice. I'm going to see if I can do more of that. And I'll use some unusual materials to get there, because sometimes the smallest brush just isn't good enough. And I want to find that space in the center of the jellyfish as well, seeing if I can mimic that. Another thing is to like pull upwards, and then also to have very little paint on your brush so it looks like some of the tentacles are in front and some are in back. And that is going to give your artwork depth and also movement no matter what subject matter you are using. All right, so it is the next day and I am devastated because I lost a bunch of my voiceover that I did yesterday and also did this morning. I don't know what happened to it. So did I tell you that I went to lunch yesterday at an Italian restaurant and it was amazing? Did I already tell you that we watched the NBA Finals last night and we watched the Knicks win over the Spurs, so all is right with the world? I don't know. I don't remember what I said and when I said it. And I am very disappointed that I lost that voiceover, and I don't really remember at what point or why my phone did that. Probably because in iMovie, I have hours of footage just sitting there. I have so many videos. I'm great at filming. I love filming. I always have creative ideas. I'm great at capturing those moments. I'm really motivated to make art. So filming me making art is fun. I hate editing. It is so tedious, and I know doing it on iMovie on my phone is the most like backwards way to do it. But you know what? It's free. It's accessible. It's just fine. Maybe one day I'll get Final Cut Pro. Maybe I'll get one of those fancy cameras. But at this point, I don't really see the point. I like my homegrown, way of doing things. So as far as the paintings going, I'm still going back and forth just with tedious detail. I think what I talked a lot about that didn't make it is the difference between a tint and a shade and a tone. And so I know I had mentioned that earlier, but at this point you can see my palette has my base color, it has a section mixed with tints, and it has a section mixed with shades. And what's hard to get students to not do at this point is to mix their tints and their shades together to create a tone. And tones are beautiful. I love painting with tones. I think they create really moody and nuanced colors, but until you're really practiced with your color scheme and you really understand how to control your palette, young students get carried away and then everything gets gray, right? Because you're taking a color mixed with white and you're taking a color mixed with quote unquote black to make that neutral. And then those colors tone each other out and create a gray color scheme. So that's something to keep in mind. Keep your palette very separate with your tints and your shades to avoid that messy, grayed out, muddy color palette. So as I'm finding detail in the jellyfish, I feel as if my background is lacking detail. And I've talked a lot about how this is how it looked with the photograph, but I'm taking this bent paper clip and I'm putting little dots of not just pure white, but of light blue and white into the background to create a textured like bubble effect. And I thought it looked a little bit flat. So then I took my brush and then I'm adding it's still a shade. It's still at like the darker end of my value scale, but I'm still trying to capture that like darker at the top, fade a little bit lighter as it goes down. So I am mixing wet on wet, those speckles that I put into my shades. Technically it's a tone, right? Because I just talked about mixing tints and shades and how it grays it out. But for this, it's a very controlled situation. It's in the background. I think it'll be just fine, especially since it's just this monochromatic blue. I think this will work out well. And I'm using that wet on wet technique to kind of brush in a little bit of light and a little bit of nuance in an otherwise kind of simple background. My students love a solid background, and sometimes that's great, but if you can ever create more depth in your background, that is a great thing to do. One of the pitfalls that my AP students always fall into, and I'm not sure if I talked about this earlier, is compositions that are central, specifically like a central portrait, where there's nothing going on besides a face, and then central background blank. So like not even the paper being white, but like a solid color, no depth, no nuance, no, treatment of that color in the background in the subject matter. And that's a really hard habit to break because it seems like a good formula, right? Like central subject, solid color background. And there's always a time and a place for it. You can find art in history books and amazing award-winning, beautiful art that does do that. But if you're doing something like an AP portfolio or you have a show, lay everything out and ask yourself, how many central compositions do I have? How many blank or one solid color backgrounds I have? And why did I make that choice? Is it a choice of convenience, a choice of just not knowing what to do? And what can you do in a background to communicate more of what you're trying to communicate in your work of art? The story, the mood, the vibe, the setting. Backgrounds are just as important as the subject matter. And I'm harping on that with a very neutral, simple background here. So maybe I'm triggering myself by doing that. But that is something I go over with my students all the time. Now I'm going to take this same paper clip because finding a really fine brush in this classroom is challenging. I bought some really nice ones, but they don't last long and they're expensive. So I'm all about experimenting with different tools. And so I'm not using pure white. I'm using a lightest tint of blue. I'm going to use pure white here. And I'm pulling and adding some tentacles, paying attention to those areas of light, not making anything solid white, right? So the tentacle would have highlights, it would have shadows. It wouldn't just be one tint, one shade, or even just a solid base color. And I'm trying to find some overlap that's going to create depth, that's going to create movement. Where are the light areas? Where are the dark areas? And how do the shapes interact with each other? I'm also now using a shish kebab stick, and this is one of my favorite classroom tools. You can buy a pack of 100 or 300 for less than $10. They last a long time, and I originally bought them for clay. So I like to use this with clay instead of a needle tool. You can use it for scoring, but it's the best, in my opinion, carving tool. You can get such a range of lines and textures. It's safer than a needle tool. And then we also use it with our India ink project that we do. And because I know it works really well with that, that, my students, I just leave it out on the counter because students love to do fine detail work with that. It's almost like a pen or a pencil technique, but with paint. And so I'm just trying to find the detail in the edges that maybe a brush can't quite get, but the texture of the shish kebab stick can. Going back to the tentacles here to create that nuance and depth. And you can see I'm mixing colors so it's not just one, showing the shadows, showing the overlap. And this is great when you can't get a fine brush in every student's hands. At home, I have lots of fine brushes, but in the classroom, I have, 30 students per class and then 6 classes a day sharing brushes. So even if students are really great at cleaning them, if students use them appropriately, which they do, I teach high school and they're really great at making sure things stay clean. You'll always have someone just kind of throw their brush in the sink, which is annoying, but overall, you'll have a student be like, someone left their brush in the sink, and you can find who did it or they'll clean it. So there's definitely a classroom culture of taking care of the art materials. I work hard for that. The students work hard for that too. It's definitely a part of their expectations, and it's a class culture that we have to work on. Obviously, not everyone's going to buy into it, but that's okay. In a group setting, you have all different types of peoples and personality types. And I'm just using this tool, again, any way I can to create a different fine line, a different texture, something different than the paintbrush could maybe create. Going back to the paintbrush here to find those like ruffly, more thick, more not as much line like the tentacle shapes. Man, words and talking is so hard. If you ever want to take a real deep look at how you sound to other people, step into a classroom and you will have an audience of 30 telling you the things you say too often, the things you say wrong. And then with the YouTube channel, I hear myself talk and my pronunciations and oh man. So if you want to hold up a big fat mirror to yourself, step into the classroom and start a YouTube channel, and then you'll have all your flaws repeated back to you or recorded forever. Going back in here, focusing back on my painting, and I'm trying to find that little central shape and how I can make it stand out differently from the smaller tentacles, getting crazy with those highlights. And I think this video is going to be right at 60 minutes, maybe even a little less, because I did find some pauses of where I got extra paint, or maybe I put my paintbrush down and went to the bathroom. So I did kind of edit out a few more longer pauses, things where I wasn't painting at all. When I edit, I find it's easier, just press start. And even if I stop, even for like 5 minutes, better to let the camera keep rolling and then come back, and it's easier to edit out. The only pitfall with that is my phone storage. I have an iPhone, I think 16, and I do pay for extra storage, just like $3 a month with Apple. I mean, I just feel like we pay so much money to Apple and Amazon. I mean, I could go on and on about all that and the subscription services that are shoved down our throats. But anyway, so the only pitfall with that is when I have so many videos that I haven't edited or uploaded that my phone starts crashing, and then I can't even get things loaded where I need them to go because of my phone storage. Now what I'm doing is I am going back to that technique of adding some texture, some like bubbles, some like little flecks of light and dust into the background. And I feel like this looks better with the shish kebab stick, making sure to put them within the jellyfish as well and right next to it. I don't want the halo effect where it's like I was too scared to put them within the jellyfish. And I think I'm getting to the point where I'm just about done. Taking pure white with my teeny tiny quote unquote brush, my little bent paper clip. And I feel like at this point, I'm almost finished with this work of art, with this painting, with this, sample that I'm going to show my students. And we'll definitely, since I have the footage, edit down into a shorter, more bite-sized video. Okay, my painting has cured at this point for 24 to 48 hours. It's completely dry, completely cured. And I'm going to take Polycrylic. So this is the brand Minwax, and I use this with clay. And so it was sitting out in my classroom, and I thought, what if I varnish my painting? I'm not someone who usually does that. I usually just like let the painting be acrylic or oil, but I've seen my coworker do that with some of her student work, and it looks so good. So like, what if I use this? And since I already had some sitting out for students to use with their clay pieces, let's see what it looks like on the acrylic painting. And I do 2 coats. You can see the streaks of the paint. So if I used a bigger brush, that would take care of that. And that would help not only go quicker, but also keep the paint a little bit more consistent. And I am going the opposite direction, which isn't a great idea because then you create like a weird texture on your paint. And then I'm going to let this dry. And like I said, I'll do a second coat, and then you'll see in just a minute, it makes just a really nice glossy finish. Again, thank you so much for sticking around. If you are at this point, you have listened to me ramble for, I think, an hour at this point. And I hope you enjoyed the conversational, casual tone here of me just rambling about art while I'm making it. Maybe no one's watching, maybe no one's here. If so, please say hi. And this is the finished look after it has been completely dry. If you're interested in any of my tutorials, check these out. Also, my website, thatartteacher.com, has completely free lesson plans, student examples, rubrics, anything you would need for art education. Thanks again for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next video.